Today I'm going to talk about phylum Chordata of the animal kingdom. Phylum Chordata is the phylum to which we also belong, so it evokes some kind of interest for all of us. Phylum Chordata is characterized by three very important characters we call salient features of the phylum Chordata. These three characters are the presence of notochord, presence of dorsal tubular nervous system, and presence of pharyngeal gill slits. Let me say something about notochord. Notochord is an elastic rod situated above the alimentary canal. Any structure or organ situated above the alimentary canal is situated to be or thought to be on the dorsal side. They belong to the dorsal side of the body because our back is on the dorsal surface, represents the dorsal surface, and our belly represents the ventral surface of the body. So, alimentary canal is actually in the middle of the body. Any structure below the alimentary canal is supposed to be on the ventral side, and any one situated above the alimentary canal is supposed to be on the dorsal side. So, notochord occupies the dorsal side of the body. It extends from the neck to the tail, and in some forms, the notochord remains persistent throughout their life. In those animals in which the notochord remains persistent throughout the life are called protochordates, and those in which the notochord becomes transformed into vertebral column are called vertebrates. And this is a mesodermal structure because the notochord is composed of connective tissue, and connective tissue is derived from embryonic mesoderm. I'm going to confine my discussion to protochordates today, that is, animals in which we don't find notochord being transformed into vertebral column. They remain as such throughout the life of the animal. One of the groups is a hemichordate, the hemichordata. In hemichordate, we find that the notochord is confined to a small region of the body. Let us take the example of a hemichordate, balanoglossus, which is also called a cornborn. It is a marine animal, lives along the seashore, squirms its hole. It's a sluggish animal, something like a worm. The body is divided into three parts: proboscis, collar, and trunk. In the collar, that's in the middle part of the body, you find that the notochord is confined only to that part. Then there is also a dorsal tubular nervous system. Dorsal tubular nervous system means that the nervous system, that is the nerve cord, is situated on the dorsal side. It is situated even dorsal to the notochord. And tubular, why do we call it tubular? Because the nerve cord is hollow. It has a cavity within, and this cavity is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. This cavity is called central canal. In all chordates, we find this nervous system to be hollow, that is, it contains a cavity. Even in the brain, the cavity is present, and these cavities are called ventricles. Okay, so dorsal tubular nervous system is the second characteristic of the phylum Chordata, and the third characteristic feature is that it is provided with gill slits situated on the dorsal side. Gills are respiratory organs in aquatic animals, you know that. You must have seen gills of fish. Okay, gills are respiratory organs, but the gills must find some kind of outlet because it is a respiratory organ, which means it gets oxygen from the water, and the water has to enter into the body in pharynx in that part, and water that loaded with oxygen, whatever oxygen is present in water has to be taken up by the respiratory pigment, and that exchange of gases takes place in the gills, and after that the water has to be expelled, and the water is expelled through the slit called gill slit. So you have got dorsal gill slits in these animals. Later on, the gill slits become closed because those animals that become terrestrial, they don't have gills, they have lungs in that place. And those that are amphibians have both gills and lungs. So you have got three salient features in phylum chordata. Of course, there are other characters also. They have blood vascular system and other systems as usual, but in the blood vascular system, you find that the blood is red, and this is due to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is not dissolved in plasma, but it is dissolved in a corpuscle called red blood corpuscle or erythrocytes, unlike invertebrates in which the respiratory pigments are dissolved in plasma. These are the characteristic features of phylum Chordata. Let me come to the second group of this particular protochordates, Urochordata. Euro, as the term refers to tail. Uro also refers to urology or urine, but anyway, in this case, tail. That is, in these animals, the notochord is confined to the tail, and that too in the larval stage. One of the remarkable features of this animal is that the larvae are active when the larvae undergo metamorphosis. They lose a number of larval characters instead and become highly modified. The adult becomes a sedentary animal, and it becomes very simple. So this kind of metamorphosis is called retrogressive metamorphosis rather than progressive metamorphosis, which is the general rule. So these animals have that kind of characteristic feature, and of course, in these animals, we find that the pharynx is highly developed, and there are two pores: one oral pore and atrial pore. The water enters through the oral aperture and passes out through the atrial aperture. There is also an endostyle, a glandular structure situated in the ventral surface of the pharynx, which secretes a mucus-like substance which traps the food material. And these are the things that are highly developed in urochordates. Now we come to cephalochordates. This group is represented by Amphioxus. You know, it's a pretty small animal. I've talked about Amphioxus a little bit some of the time. Amphioxus resembles a very tiny fish. It has body is provided with excellent layers of muscles. It has veal organ in the anterior part, and that veal organ has large number of cilia. They move in a fashion so as to draw food, plankton into the mouth. These animals are swimmers. They have sort of fins. But one of the most weird features of this animal is that the notochord extends from the head to the tail, a very extended notochord, which ought not to be the case in general because the notochord is not supposed to be present in the head. You know that the notochord, after all, becomes transformed into vertebral column, and we don't have vertebrae in our brain. Vertebrae starts from the neck region. The first vertebrae atlas axis, that is cervical vertebra. There are seven cervical vertebra. Different kinds of vertebra. There, I'm not going to talk about them right now. But you see, these protochordates are constituted by hemichordate, urochordate, and cephalochordates, of which I have said something, and next time I'll talk about higher chordates.